nation, feeling so hard. Summer rhythms flame, we're gonna thrive. Go, 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 oh, shout it out loud. Hear the summer sun, we're a summer-loving crowd. Talking Brazil ball, we're breaking it down. Bringing the passion.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talking Brazil Ball, the podcast all about Brazilian football. We're back to talk about the season preview to Brasileirão, which is still waiting to kick off. We're here to talk about another season preview. George, how are you doing this afternoon, this evening even?
Yeah, I'm okay, James. Thank you. I mean, como vai to everybody listening and watching back. Yes, how are you? I mean, we have got a little special guest here tonight, so just forgive us if we're a bit distracted, but my little one is here with me, James. So, of course, I might be a little bit distracted, but we're here to talk about Brazilian football, of course, and how are you doing this evening? Like I said, como vai to you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yes, we did ask her if she wanted to be on. She said she's bored of talking about football. I don't know if that relates to Brazilian football as well, but I think you've been pushing it hard, haven't you, with Leeds doing well at the minute? She's had enough.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, bless her. We've been trying to get her into football and Leeds, but I think she's she'll get there. But if she's sick of talking about it, I'm certainly not. So,
well, that's something, isn't it? I hope not, because again, we've got plenty to get into today. As anybody who's been listening will know, we have been doing the season preview, so we've been doing 14. This is the first 14. Somebody go. Maybe pop it on mute, George, when she's if she pops in. So anybody who's been listening, we've been doing a run through. So initially, we've done the promoted teams. We've had a look at those. We've also had a look at the title challengers last week. So we did 4 teams who we think may be in the running for the Brasileirão to be champions this year. And this year, George, we're going to start our season previews individually by team. So anybody who was listening last week will know that we're going to do it 4x4. So this week we're going to go in alphabetical order. So we're going to look at Galo, we're going to look at Bahia, we're going to look at Botafogo, who we did look at a little bit last week as well, and then we're going to go on to Red Bull Bragantino as well. So 4 teams who we're going to focus on and just see how they're getting along in their preparations for the new season. So we're going to take 2 teams each. I'm going to take, I think, Bahia and Red Bull Bragantino. You're going to take Galo and Botafogo. But before we get into that, George, I don't know if you've got a little quiz for us this week to test the listeners, the knowledge.
Yeah, of course, James. As I do every week, I've got a quiz this time as well. So we're on with the quiz, and it's actually surrounding my team, James. And that man behind me, and more specifically, Mr. Cuca, the new manager of Galo, he's a legend amongst Galo fans. He did deliver them a few titles, and it's that I want to know, James. With Galo, Cuca is back. How much silverware has he brought to Galo in the past? And also, I also want to know how many Serie A titles he has won as well on top of that.
Don't know. I guess perhaps he might have been there when they last won it, which was only a few years ago. So I guess he's probably won. I don't think they won the Libertadores, did they? Although they might have done. They were definitely close. I reckon he's won two Brasileirãos with Galo and Copa do Brasil, and altogether maybe 4 Serie A.
You're not that far away, actually, James. He's won 2 Serie A Brasileirão titles. One, like you said, right, so with Galo in 2021 season. It was part of a double. He did win the Brazilian Cup with them as well that season. So they got the double there. He also won the Libertadores with Galo in 2012-13 season.
Wow.
And he's won 2 Serie A titles overall. The other one was in 15-16 with Palmeiras. So he's vastly experienced very, exciting, for Galo fans to have him back, in the club, and hopefully looking forward to another good season.
Yeah, incredibly successful then, wasn't he? With a couple of really big teams, and obviously must be a real legend of the club there to have won every all the three major trophies really. So exciting times. Obviously, we know what happened with him last year at Paranense. Didn't work out and ultimately led to them going down. So I think he's got a bit to prove. I know you were a big fan of him. I don't think you probably knew his Galo past, did you, when you were talking him up last year? But maybe that was some kind of a sign.
You know what, James? I'll be honest. I didn't actually know of his Galo pass with Atletico Mineiro, but obviously doing a little bit of research when he got appointed again, you realise, wow, actually he's very, very experienced with Galo, won titles, and it's a great appointment for me. And we'll get into Galo shortly as well. It's a nice little segue into Galo. To talk about them, like you said, we're talking about them tonight, and they're first up. So, very much excited. I'm excited to have him there. I'm excited to see what Galo, and they'll do a lot better, I think, than they did last season. So, it's all systems go now. They're doing some good business. So, excited to see what happens,
I think it probably helps Kuka coming in that, it could hardly be worse than it was. I mean, obviously, they had the success to a degree in the Libertadores, although heartbreak in the end, but I think it'd be hard for him to do worse on a domestic scale anyway, so he probably benefits from that. Well, let's start with Galo, George. As you said, we're going to go alphabetically, and they do come up first. Atletico Mineiro, of course. So, it's your team. As you said, you've spent a year now supporting them, getting to know them well. Obviously, last year was a real disappointment in the way that it ended. Gabriel Milito did okay in terms of getting them to 2 cup finals. Didn't get over the line in either of them. If he had have done, perhaps he'd have kept his job. In the end, it was inevitable that he didn't. They came in the end? Was it 12 in the end? No, it was lower, wasn't it? They were 14.
I think they came 12 last time. I'll just check it actually. I think they did 12 last season, James. It was 12th. I mean, obviously it wasn't a very good season overall. Like I've said many times, Gabriel Milito hung his hat so often on the cup competitions. Ultimately, every one of them failed. And he ended up copping for it. They went on a real dive of a run towards, the back end of the Serie A season. Obviously salvaged it in the end, only just. I mean, we're talking 12th, but we're only talking 4 points from relegation in the end. So,
well, of course, it was still on the last day. They could have gone down. It was still a possibility that they would have done, which was unthinkable, really. But like we said, it's a fresh page, fresh season. How are they preparing then? What's been going on at Galo? Obviously, we know about the manager. What's been the turnover in the squad, and how are they starting in terms of? Is it the Mineiro, the regional competition?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, they've not lost the game, James. Actually, in that league, in the regional leagues, they've won now 5 in a row. They've won a game in the Copa do Brasil on Tuesday away at Tocantinopolis. So I'm not sure what division they're in actually, but late goals from Hulk. The new signing, James, Ronnie, who was on at Palmeiras last season, he's been signed a few days ago, of course, from Palmeiras in a little bit of a heavy transfer fee, 5.2 million, which is quite a lot, I think, in terms of what Brazilian teams do end up spending. But they do, so it's going incredibly well. Obviously, the Kuka feeling and the freshness, the newness of, having an awful season last time out, really, in the end, and coming back, brand new page, new start, new season, new manager, new players. It's all sort of the bouncing on the back of that, really, and they haven't lost a game yet in his reign, and they're going into the season in incredibly high spirits by the look of it, really. They've done some decent business. Like I said, Ronnie is one of them. They have shopped heavily, actually, at Palmeiras. I don't know whether that's Kuka's links, obviously with him being there, and having obviously a good time there. Won the Copa, won the Brasileirão there. Obviously, he's probably got connections, and it looks like maybe that has been, at the forefront of their business. Four of the 8 signings they've brought in have been from Palmeiras. Actually, obviously, you've got Ronnie, who's probably the standout one. You've got
the fellow with the big mask, isn't he, Ronnie?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, listeners might remember he pulled out that pig mask that time. There was a bit of controversy, I remember, over that, was there, I think. And yeah, he sort of died. Really didn't have a good season after that. Really didn't actually score that many goals last time out. Only 4 in the Serie A last season, so didn't really have a good season. But I still think he's quite a good signing for the level that they want to play at. Really, and challenge he was at Palmeiras, who obviously went close last season, and he's in and amongst I think he'll be in and amongst the title challenge again. The other players coming in from Palmeiras, as last week they signed Caio Paulista. He's on loan from Palmeiras, a left back. Also coming in from Palmeiras was Patrick Silva, who's a young player, left-footed. I think he's a defender as well. And then also there was Gabriel Menino, who we did speak about, I think last week, James. Midfielders. Also, then there's a few others that have signed. The standout for me also has to be Junior Santos from Botafogo. So they've actually signed a couple of really experienced strikers there who might end up getting them the goals that they need to push on and, perhaps surprise a couple of people in the end and do better a lot than last season and perhaps knock on the door for the challenge of a title win, possibly. I think they've definitely got the credentials to do it. Like I said, they'll be bouncing back up off a disappointing season. We've seen it so many times. Teams have a disappointing one, then they have a fantastic one the next. So I think they've recruited well. In terms of players out, there's not been that many really to speak of. There has been one particular one that, obviously there's been Paulinho, who we did speak about, another link between Palmeiras and Galo in the winter window. Obviously, he went the other way. And also Federico Zarracho, who scored a few nice goals last season. He's gone back to Argentina with Racing Club. He's back there now. But the standout of the departures has to be Eduardo Vargas, who has gone back to, he's gone to Uruguay, the Chilean man. Really well-experienced player, James. He will be a miss. He did score a few important goals for Galo last season. Very experienced player, former Chilean international, of course. Up until...
Did he not score? Did he not score in the Libertadores final, Vargas?
Yes, he did. So he came on at half-time, didn't he, remember? And he got them back into the game. So
I think he missed a couple of chances as well, didn't he?
He did, yeah. He missed one or two really good opportunities, actually, that would have tied the game. Ultimately, the man playing now for Galo, Santos, finished the game and Fogo won 3-1. But Vargas, you remember, James, he's a good, experienced player, but he's gone to Uruguay, so with Nacional. So, he'll be a miss. But I think they'll probably fancy the chances, and say they've recruited and replaced him quite well. So let's wait and see. But for me, I think they'll do quite well actually this time.
Yeah, they've certainly made up for that Paulinho sale. I think there was a couple of player swaps involved in that as well. Actually, I think they had money and maybe a player or two go the other way as well. So I think that was the arrangement. Obviously, experience has come in. They've obviously still got Hulk. He's still going to be the main man probably for goals. I did see a few clips going around on social media of Hulk blasting in a free kick recently. I think that must have been in the regional competition. So he's gearing up for a better season, hopefully this time around. I don't think. Yeah, let's ask for a prediction then, George. I think because we're doing the season previews, it is the first one. I think we can say a prediction for where you think Galo will finish. So just a placing basically in the Brasileirão, where you think they're going to come next season.
Yeah, I mean, just as a side note on to who before I give me a prediction, James, side note, today they've made a sale actually, which is quite a big one really. A man who was vastly experienced and played a big part in the season last time out is Otavio, the centre midfielder, who's gone to Fluminense. Very, very experienced centre midfield player, 30-year-old, and he's gone out just today to Flu. So he's a bit of a miss, but obviously they feel like they've recruited quite well in other areas and can probably maybe they'll go out and do a bit more business. Who knows? But yeah, he's gone. But I think they'll actually. I think they'll go, and I think they'll. I'm going to say we come third. I think they'll be challenging right to the end. I don't think Kuka might not put as much on the cup competitions as Milito definitely did. I think he'll want to win the league, and I think they'll go hard for it. I think they'll still recruit, and I think they'll have a good season. I don't think they'll win it, but I think we'll be definitely close, and I expect them to be with Kuka in charge, definitely, with the experience they're bringing in, experienced at this level. So I expect them to go for it and to do a good job of it.
Yeah, and like you said, well, we spoke about last week when we did look at the challenges, we didn't include Galo in that, but Palmeiras are perhaps, maybe slightly weaker than they have been, with Abel Ferreira maybe under a little pressure. Flamengo, we still don't really know how Felipe Luis is going to handle, a full season at the senior level. And then Botafogo, of course, there's all kinds of upheaval there as well. So they could make use of that and step in, certainly. I think that's not a bad prediction. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on Galo just before we move on to Bahia?
Not really, James. Like I said, I think we're in for a good season in all, recruited well, and it can't go any worse than last season, really. I think if we do get the finals this time, I fancy us to win it and actually do a better job of how Milito went about it. Really, it was very disappointing in the end. But yeah, I feel like we're going in the right direction definitely from the start this time.
Do you know what's happened to Milito? Has he landed another job? Do you know?
I don't actually know, James. I'll have to find out. If you give me a minute, I'll probably be able to find out where he's gone. But
doesn't seem as though he does have a
no. I don't think he will do. I think he was a really strange choice, actually, I thought. And yeah, I couldn't understand it at the time. I voiced my concern at the time about it. And it was clearly valid, wasn't it? Because he just didn't come up at all. Although at the end of the day, they did get to finals and he just come up short. But in the end, if you lose, it's failure, isn't it? And it was, and ultimately it copped for his job. And it might go badly wrong with Kuka, who knows? But for me, looking like we've recruited well, I think we're doing it. Yeah, like I said, I think we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so. Good appointment, although we thought that last year as well at Paranense, and he did not last long there. And he was, of course, a fan favourite at that club as well. Right, George, thank you for that. That's a good overview of Galo, and we'll wait to see how they do get on. Let's move on to Bahia, who are an interesting club actually to cover. I think we obviously talked about them, as we did with most clubs, to be fair. We talked about them a fair bit last year. Obviously, they started really, really well. Looked like they might push on towards the top four, really, at the first kind of third of the season. They did fall away. In the end, they ended up finishing 8th. They did still have a much better season than the year before when they were battling relegation. But yeah, I think that ultimately Bahia fans were maybe a bit disappointed with the way that the season ended. They did still qualify for the Copa Libertadores qualification rounds, which they are actually playing now, George. They did actually play the first leg of that qualification round against the strongest, if you remember them from last season. They are from Bolivia, and they played that on Wednesday morning, the first leg away in Bolivia. They drew that 1-1, so not a terrible result, probably you'd say, coming back home. And we know they do have a decent home record as well. So Rogerio Ceni, George, you'll be pleased to hear, is still there, still plugging away, although I did fear for his job a bit towards the end of last season. I think the fans had slightly turned against him, and I think that if a similar style of football happens and they do start losing games at the start of the season, I think he might be one of the favourites for the sack, I would say. But he's still there, and they've started well in the regional competitions. The Baiano, they do actually play 2. They play the Baiano, they play the Copa del Nordeste. doing pretty well in both of those. So, the teams of the Northeast we've touched on a few times. They're not really the big boys. So you'd fancy Bahia really especially the way they're now one of the top half teams in Brazil. You'd fancy them to get over the line and win at least one of those competitions. And there has been quite a bit of change, to be fair, at Bahia, George. I mean, the interesting thing now, we know the players. We can have a little bit more of a look at who the key players were. And I think Bahia really, it's been a bit of a strange window in a few respects, really. You talk about Flu signing Otavio from Galo today. I think they've only just signed either today or in the recent days. They've signed Everaldo from Bahia as well, who was their top scorer last year. So if you remember last week, George, we spoke about Santos, or the week before that, and they've signed Tassiano. So Tassiano and Everaldo were their two top scorers last season, 8 goals and 7 goals respectively. Sorry, Everaldo had 8, Tassiano had 7. So they've lost both of those, and that looks, it's always difficult. You lose the goals out of your team. I'm not sure what your reaction is to that, but that might take some doing to fill the gap.
He's definitely going to do so, I think, James, for sure. I mean, I've just seen Everaldo's gone, like you said, to Kano as well a few weeks ago, well, about a month ago as well. So it's incredibly hard to find goals in his team. That's the hardest thing to find, isn't it, as we know? And for me, Semi, I agree. If he doesn't start well, he's finished, basically. I know he did such a good job last season. Like I said, they did well to draw with the strongest there. And let's see how they get on in the second leg. But it's going to put a bit of pressure on them. And if it starts to go bad in the Brasileirão, will he start prioritising the Sudamericana? I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see how they cope with the more games they're going to play also. And the squad's pretty big, but losing Everaldo today, big blow. And both the top scorers, like you said, from last season, both gone now. And looking at the players that they've replaced, I'm not really sure, to be quite honest. Well, I know Eric Fulger's come in.
Well. Yeah, he did. He was a scorer, wasn't he, last year? And I did want to say as well, just before you maybe gave the game away, that of course they did. It wasn't just those two, Tassiano and Everaldo, who they lost. They've also lost Biel, our friend, who went really, really good move for him, to be fair, to Sporting Lisbon, and he's already playing for them. Obviously, the season's well underway in Portugal, midway through. So he's played 3 games already for them. He had a good season, I thought. We were often wondering why Rogério Ceni didn't start him a little bit more often. Well, he's got his move to Europe, to Portugal, and I would say we should be keeping an eye on him, Gabriel Teixeira, for a move to perhaps one of the more established leagues in the future. He's only 23. But he, George, was the 4th top scorer. So they've lost the 1st, 2nd and 4th top scorer. The 3rd one is my friend Luciano Rodriguez, who we're expecting big things from this season, aren't we? So I think he's going to step up. But you say they haven't replaced so well. I would point you towards the man behind me there. In his Real Sociedad days, William Jose is the real standout, attractive signing, the star signing for Bahia this season on a free, George, from Spartak Moscow. Premier League fans will remember him from a really poor spell at Wolves where he couldn't seem to buy a goal. But prior to that, he's got good experience in Spain with Real Betis. I think he was at Real Madrid even in his younger days. Didn't really make an impact, but that shows you the quality of him. I don't think he's not, terribly old player. He's 33. So, and he's already scored 3 goals in his first 5 appearances in those regional competitions. So, George, I would suggest that they have got a better goal scorer than both Everaldo and Tassiano in one there. They've also brought in Kaiki, which is quite an eye-catching arrival as well. He's obviously from Manchester City, so part of the City group, making use of those ties. He hasn't made an impact at City. He's played a couple of times. He is only 21, right winger. And he's Flu Academy graduate. So back in Brazil from Flu, it's probably a bit of a climb down from his respect perspective. But again, a decent arrival for Bahia, and you'd have to say that that's possibly an improvement or potentially an improvement. You talk about Pulgar as well, who, as we know, was a quite prolific at Serie A last year in Serie B. So I would say that, they've kind of done all right. And in Rodriguez, I'd argue that they possibly have the league's outstanding player in waiting. Once Esteval perhaps goes, he was in competition with him a few times for the young player of the round. But I wanted to get your reaction, George, on Willian Jose's arrival, because I think that's a bit of a coup for Bahia, although I don't know how he's been getting on, to be quite honest, in Moscow. Not well, but actually by the look of it.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't play there for long, to be fair, James. I think he only scored he didn't score at all in the league there. But you're right, to be honest, very, very. I would say it's the same as you. It's quite a coup. It's quite a marquee signing, if you want, and yeah, probably better than Everaldo and Ticino to put together, because look at his. He played in the Premier League, all right. He wasn't good. He only scored the one goal for Wolves. But it wasn't that long ago. It was only, 4 years ago. So he was still an experienced player then. Real Sociedad, lots of goals in Serie A. Like you said, you don't play for Real Madrid. I know he was only on loan, but you don't play for them for nothing. And he did play once, so he's got that on his TV, So fair play to that. To them for getting that. Like you said, I think I fancy them to go further with the Man City links and try and get some more players out on loan. The youth players, like we might see some of them go to Brazil and to Bahia in the near future. So fair play. There's a lot to do. Rogério Ceni is on the line, I think, this time. A bit of pressure on him. But I'm excited to see what they do. As you know, I'm a big fan of Ceni. And I want to see them do well. So hopefully they have a good season to come.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Willian Jose does have plenty of experience in playing back in Brazil with Sao Paulo, with Grêmio and Santos. So he knows the league as well. He's been around in his home country. So yeah, like you said, I think that they'll be looking to make another step forward. It might not be easy for them, and they will be wanting to make sure they get into the Libertadores as well, just to give that a bit of a go too. But Ceni certainly does need to hit the ground running a little bit, but I think they will. I'm going to ask you for the predictions, George, for the finishes, just to be consistent in that way. So you've gone Galo third. I'm going to jot those down so you can't get away with putting the same team in twice. Where are you going with Bahia then?
Well, James, as it is after this, I will probably do a full table, so you will be able to see.
This is the table. Yeah.
I'll give it to you, so you know where I place these teams, and you won't forget, as I might, but I will write it down also. But here, like I said, I think they might struggle with the weight of games, the sheer vastness and what you call it, all these games that they might have to play if they get into the Libertadores, along with the cup competition. But we'll wait and see. Like I said, Jose, good signing. I'm going to go. I don't think they'll do quite as well as they did last season, given the all the games that they might have to play. I'm going to go 11th for Bahia.
11th for Bahia.
Yeah, I think I'll go with 11th. I think they'll be okay. They'll be fine. I think they'll start to look at the might of the City group, like I said, and tap into that market. They'll obviously expect highly of Bahia now. They've invested in them now. So I think we'll see a little bit upturn eventually, but this might be a season of kind of little bit of a transition for them. 11th would still be a fantastic achievement, to be fair.
Yeah, 11th would probably be fine, wouldn't it? Consolidate that kind of mid-table position, stay away from the relegation battle. I think they probably wouldn't take that just now, but I think as the season goes on, that might kind of fall into place. Cool. So that's Bahia. They're kind of shaping up, interesting. Bit of all change up top, mainly for them. And next we come to Botafogo, George. And I must point out to the listeners here that we don't have a jingle this week. The Talking Brazil Ball band have let us down. I don't know what they've been doing, but they haven't been able to get in the studio and record us a little jingle. So I'm going to just play the theme song just to give us a little break. And when we come back, we'll be talking about Botafogo and Red Bull Bragantino.
Summer sun, we're
Okay, so welcome back. And let's get to Botafogo, George. So anybody listening last week will already should hopefully be well aware of what's going on with Botafogo. We did cover them in our prediction for the title challenges. Lots has been going on. George, can you tell us, in the meantime, last time we spoke, they were looking for a manager. Have they found one just yet? Because they didn't have one at the time that we spoke last. Oh, you're on mute, actually. So,
yeah, sorry, James. The answer is no. They haven't still found one. They were extremely close, James. I think they are getting closer, but they were very close to a manager. They are now probably further away from getting a new manager. We won't speak too tough about Fogo because we're obviously, like you said, we did cover them last week for anybody who did listen, but a quick roundup for anybody who missed that episode. They are looking for a new manager. They were very, very close to getting Vasco Matos from Santa Clara. Now, Santa Clara, James, Portuguese side, are doing fantastically well, actually, in Portugal. They were promoted, obviously only relegated the season before last. But in 22-23, they topped the Portuguese second division last season, and now they're fifth in the Portuguese first division, which is absolutely fantastic. 22 games into the season, it's don't look like a fluke, and they're marshalled by Vasco Matos, who's a 44 Portuguese man. Santa Clara's been there since July of 2023. And he's done, like I said, he oversaw the promotion. Now he's overseeing a fantastic season in the top division. Fogo were on the verge of getting him, but it looks like he had a change of heart in the very last moment we're now on Thursday, aren't we, James? Yesterday he changed his mind by the look of it and didn't want to end up with Fogo. So he's gone and opted to see out the season with Santa Clara. It would have been a fantastic opportunity for him to go to Fogo. Looks like he's turned it down. But there has now been also, potential rumours about whether he's actually got the proper license, coaching license to coach. Yeah. So it's all up in the air. But the bare fact is, Vasco Matos will not be the Fogo manager for the upcoming Brasileirão season.
Yeah, and he sounds like a promising young manager. Actually, we know that Portuguese coaches travel pretty well across Europe generally, to be fair, and into the Premier League as well. So maybe he's only 44, you said, maybe one to keep an eye on for future jobs. He'll probably, you'd imagine, I mean, the big clubs in Portugal at the minute are a little bit up and down. I think Sporting aren't particularly settled in a manager. Porto as well. They lost Conceição not that long ago, didn't they? Benfica. I can't remember who's at Benfica these days, to be honest. But yeah, that's it's a bit of a mess really at Fogo, you'd have to say. I mean, had such a good season, double winners, historic season for them under Arthur Jorge to be still searching for a manager. I mean, we're still a good 6 weeks out before the end of the season, maybe a bit less than that, 5 weeks maybe. But to not have a manager at this stage, it doesn't bode well, does it?
No, it doesn't bode well, James. And this is what I was saying last week, and this is why I do think they'll struggle. It's all up in the air. They've lost a lot of key players. I just don't see them having a good season, really. And it'll be such a shame after the famous double win last time out. But I just don't see it ending in such a high for them this time. They're waiting on a manager. For me, it'll be a little bit of a scramble for them to get one now. And like I said, we're still about a month and some away from the start of the season. But you'd have expected them as holders to have a manager in by now. You'd expect people be that have a queue of managers wanting to take that job. So I'm sure they do. It's John Teixeira probably that's taking his time with it, and he'll be frustrated that Matos has effectively turned them down here, really, and they'll be disappointed at that going into a season where the pressure will be on them right from the very start to better or to at least equal what they did last time out. And I think it'll be very, very difficult for them to do that. Really, I do.
Yeah, Texter doesn't really suffer fools too much. Or Teixeira, as you call him there, John Teixeira. Maybe he's a kind of alias.
I forgot. Yeah, I think I'm still talking about. I think in my mind still thinking about BL.
Can't believe
Yeah,
he's gone, can you?
no, I just can't believe it. I was such a fan of him, But great move for him. Like you said, unbelievable. It's definitely one to keep an eye on him. Very pleased for him to get a move to Europe and such a prominent side as well. Sporting a great side in Portugal. So let's see how he gets on. But like you said, the sort of transition from Brazilian football to Portuguese football and the other way around, and Portuguese managers like to come to Brazil, don't they, as well? Seems a little bit of a nice transition and a nice sort of similarity maybe going on between the two countries almost, and the way of football potentially as well.
Yeah, lots of similarities. In terms of Fogo then, what business have they done? Just briefly, just as a reminder, I know obviously you've spoken about Junior Santos has gone. They also lost Tiquinho Suarez to Santos, didn't they? So a little bit of a gap there, perhaps up top.
Yeah, well, Luis Enrique, of course, went to Zenit.
Of course, yeah.
Thiago Almada went to Lyon. To the like I said, Santos, Suarez. They've really, they've really missed quite a few big players, like I said, and they haven't really done a great deal in terms of replacing them. The one you probably look at is from Zenit again, like Galo have done a lot of business with Palmeiras. Fogo seem to have done a lot of business in and out with Zenit. Two players have come in from Zenit. The centre midfield player Wendell, who's a Brazilian, I think he came through at Fluminense. Also another Brazilian who has been called up for the Brazilian national team in the past, Arthur Guimarães, the right winger. He has signed from Zenit for a good fee, £8.7 million, James, brought him back to Brazil. Other than that, it's very much, you wonder where else is, there isn't a great deal of standout. There is one, Nathan Ribeiro, who's come in from Grêmio. Ribeiro from Grêmio. No, he's from Grêmio. 8.2 million they've splashed. They have splashed a bit of money, Fogo. Obviously, that title winning money and the Libertadores winning money is being spent. But yeah, Ribeiro, Brazilian. He's a young lad. He's only 20. So that is a bit of maybe one to keep an eye on, James, for our young player of the round awards potentially coming into the season. But overall, yeah, they're the only kind of standouts. And of course, Leandro Link, the goalkeeper, coming in from Paranense as well. Let's see how he gets on. Failed a little bit with Paranense, obviously in their ultimate relegation, but let's see if he can rejuvenate his career. He's only 23, to be fair. Maybe he will be the number one for the upcoming season. Let's wait and see. So they have done a bit of business, but for me, being holders and being Libertadores holders as well, I would have expected more, to be quite honest.
Yeah, probably the manager doesn't help the manager situation. So given all that, then where are you predicting Fogo? I think by the sounds of what's going on, I think anybody would be hard pushed to have them down as favourites, which is a bit of a shame for them, given that they've waited so long for a title and they'd probably want to go on and make themselves, top dogs for another year. But what do you think? I don't think you're going to back them for the title, are you? So where are you placing them?
Yeah, not the title this time, James. I think it's such a shame for the fans of all this chaos, it seems, looking from the outside in. Not the best way to start a title defence or a Libertadores defence either. For me, I think they'll obviously still be up above there. They're still one of the best teams in the league, aren't they? They'll definitely be challenging, like we covered last week. But in terms of, I think you can be challenging without properly challenging, if you know what I mean. I think they'll be probably there. I'm going to go with 4th for Fogo, I think.
4th, yeah. I think you might be a bit lower, to be honest. I think once you lose some players of the quality, Luis Enrique and Thiago Almada in particular, I think that is going to impact them more than probably people might realise. So, but we'll put them in a 4th. we'll put them in at 4th there and see how we get on. So that's Fogo. Again, we'll keep an eye on the managerial search and we'll keep updated if there is anything, maybe next week. In the meantime, George, let's move on. Let's move on to a club who very nearly didn't make it onto this Brasileirão preview this season for 2025, and that's Red Bull Bragantino. We know how close they came to relegation last year. It was such a tight-run thing. They just escaped it on the last day, of course, and they had a couple of big wins, didn't they? Right at the end of the season. Eduardo Sacha was the hero, really, wasn't he, in the end against Paranense? But they did survive, George, and they will be hoping to put that season behind them and push on to, it was a bit of a blip, really, in terms of, you look at since they've been in Serie A, they finished 10th, 6th, 14th, 6th, and then 16th. So if you go off that logic, they should be up 6th again, or there or thereabouts. They're obviously a club as the Red Bull franchise. We know, obviously, Mr. Klopp has taken over as the head of global soccer there. He has been in Brazil over the last couple of weeks. He did visit the facilities. He took in the Palmeiras and who were they playing? It was a Sao Paulo derby, wasn't it? Was it Corinthians? I think they might have played. Yeah. So he was there, Mr. Klopp. So he's got a handle over the recruitment. I don't know exactly how involved he'll be in the day-to-day running of the clubs or transfer business. It's a bit vague as to what his actual position. I mean, his position isn't vague, but what it entails is a bit. But as we know, they've stumbled on a bit of stability at the end of last season in hiring Fernando Seabra, who did a fantastic job, not only guiding them to safety, but the results were good as well. He made them hard to beat. They weren't winning a lot until they needed to at the end. In the meantime, they were drawing. They weren't losing games. He shored them up defensively. And he's obviously carried on, being given the keys to go again for the new season. And I think that's fantastic news for Bragantino, really. Their fans should surely be positive. As I said there, I think when you have a season like that as a club that you didn't expect, I think the best thing to do is probably just to carry on as normal. You don't need to rip something up. You can put it down to a bit of a blip, I think. You've got a good manager in charge. The squad itself isn't particularly in bad shape. I wouldn't have said quite a few young players with some experience also mixed in there. And obviously we're going to look at the signings as well. But I think better things ahead for sure for Bragantino. In terms of the signings, they haven't done loads, to be quite honest. I think obviously the standout from our point of view, George, is Pitta, of course, has joined from Cuiabá, who were relegated. So your reaction to that move, because of course we spoke about Pitta quite a bit last year. The goals did dry up for him eventually, but he started pretty well. He's still got 15 goals across all competitions for a struggling Cuiabá side, 7 in the league. He's got 1 already in the Paulista, but that's in 9 games. 7 of those have been starts, actually. So he's not a prolific player. And you do worry perhaps that if he doesn't get going, then once again they might struggle for goals.
Yeah, look, James, I'm pleased for Peter because obviously we like him. He's got a bit of similarities in probably the way I look, and also obviously he shares a birthday with both of us, doesn't he? Obviously, so he's definitely a player that we look for, and happy that he didn't drop in to Serie B with Cuiabá because, like you said, the goals did dry up for him. But he was, I think, did you say he was a top scorer for Cuiabá? I think he was last season. It wasn't very hard. I don't think they scored that many. Obviously, they were playing in the Sudamericana as well, weren't they? So I think he scored a good amount of continental goals as well. 15, like you said, in all, 4 in the Sudamericana last season. So, yeah, that's a good signing for Bragantino. I think, like you said, if the goals dry up, I hope that they don't hang the hat too much on him because he seems like very much a player that scores in clusters. And if he's going for a bad run, he's going for a real dry spell by the look of it. Obviously, he did forge his way into the Paraguayan national side, which was great. And let's see if he can continue to score goals at Serie A level and make himself a mainstay for his national side. But for me, it's a decent enough signing. I think it was actually it was a 3.7 million. They splashed on him, so that's quite a lot, really. Again, in what Brazilian football they do pay. Also, I must admit, I do kind of like the signing of Lucas Barbosa, who, of course, was on loan at Juventude from Santos last season. Santos has cashed in. £2.2 million has brought him to RB Bragantino. So I'm excited to see how he can continue to do as well. So they made some decent signings. Douglas Mendes has come again on loan from Salzburg. Obviously, again, like Bahia, are taking advantage of the City group. RB Bragantino are potentially taking advantage of other Red Bull owned sides. And also, though, the transfers out, James, the one that I'm really gutted about, which is
hang on, why are you running away with this? This is my coverage. You've just kind of hijacked it there. I asked for your opinion on pizza. You just kind of got off. Hang on.
I just got carried away with it. I'm sorry. You continue.
Well, yeah, thank you. They're not going to rely on Pizza completely for the goals because they do have Fernando, who's also coming from a Red Bull Salzburg, who's had a decent record for them, actually, 25-year-old. And like you said, Douglas Mendes, I think, has come back as well. And Barbosa looks to me like a really good player. I know he scored a couple of really good goals for Juventude, didn't he, last year? So he's certainly one to keep an eye on. And George, I know what you're going to say. That's why I stopped you in your tracks, because it's another disappointing transfer from Brazil to Russia. And this one is a player who wasn't at Bragantino last year, but did make enormous impact on the Brazilian league. And that was your friend, George. I will let you take this one because I know how much you rated him. It's Alejandro, who, of course, was a joint top scorer last season, surprised everybody at Vitória, had a terrific season, and he's gone to CSK Moscow, hasn't he?
Yeah, really disappointed, James. Sorry, it happened a couple of days ago, didn't it? And 21 goals in all competitions last season for Vitória, 15 in the league. Like you said, joint top scorer, wasn't he, in the end? And it's such a shame to see him go to Russia. And, I don't want to badmouth Russian football too much, but it's like, I don't understand that. I was looking forward to seeing where he went in Serie A potentially. And he's just got, it's a big move for him. You can't, begrudge him that. He's had such a good season, such a big impact on Vitória. I'm sure RB Bragantino would have wanted really to keep hold of him and see how they went on this season. But for me, disappointed. 3.6 million doesn't seem a great deal, does it really? I know he's 25. He's not a young player really, but he's still relatively young. And to see him completely far away from anybody's sort of eyes really in Russia. Nobody's really, to the greatest respect in Russian football, nobody's really keeping an eye on Russian football, are they? So he's not really put himself in any kind of window in terms of where teams can really look at him and say, actually, he's a good player. Whereas I think if it had gone to a higher up team in Serie A or almost just continued at Bragantino, I think he might have got a bigger move eventually. Maybe he will anyway. It's still European football, isn't it? So let's wait and see how he does. But from my point of view, disappointed really.
I'm sure the scouts will be still looking out. I think the disappointing thing in the past, Brazilian football has a rich history of sending players to Russia and into Ukraine as well, of course, with Shakhtar, as we've seen already this window with Kawa Elias going there as well. But I think the disappointing thing is obviously at the moment the Russian clubs are not in the Champions League, so or the Europa League. They're not competing the band by UEFA. So in the past, at least, Zenit in particular, CSK Moscow as well, Spartak to a lesser probably degree, they did have a chance to play at the top level in Europe and make an impact, catch the eye. Some top players have played at Zenit over the years. Hulk, of course, was there for quite a long time. So, it's a club that do have a history of showcasing that talent, but without that kind of window of that platform, the likes of Alejandro, you can easily see how they would just fade, spend a year, maybe 2 years, then maybe come back and then end up probably at a lesser team than he probably would have gone to in Brazil if he'd have gone straight away now. So it is disappointing. I guess we'll have new top scorer this year, Yuri Alberto, who we shared that with, is still in the league, of course. and we'll see how long for. But yeah, that was a major outgoing from Bragantino. I think from their point of view, they'd probably bank the money and be relatively happy. They mustn't have been completely convinced by him. He was there for a couple of years, and they sent him to Vitoria. So maybe they probably had written him off a little bit, sent him to a promoted club, and have been able to get a decent fee for him in their kind of terms. The only real major outgoing, to be honest, been a couple of other ones I don't think are really worth kind of going into too much. So yeah, that's Red Bull Bragantino, George. I think, I mean, in terms of Alejandro going, aside from a personal disappointment that he's gone, I don't think it'll impact them as a team purely because he wasn't there last season. So, how can they miss him from that respect? Ivan Cavallero is not long there. He's an experienced player. Perhaps he can step up and do something. Eduardo Sasha, as we know. And then they've got Pitta and Fernando and a couple of other young players as well who can maybe make an impact on there. But yeah, what do you see Bragantino doing? I think, again, it's probably the only way is up for them, really, isn't it? No continental competition to distract them with. Maybe they could be a dark horse, George.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, James. I mean, before I will give my sort of final thoughts on Bragantino and a sort of predicted league position, I do think it'll be a better season for them. I think Seabra being there for hopefully a full season from their point of view will be definitely a positive. But one thing I'd just like to note about the transfers, I thought that they might, if this man's on the market, Bragantino might take advantage of their links with the Red Bull system and go for this man who is a Brazilian man himself. Mr. Elias Manoel from New York Red Bulls. From New York Red Bull, he looks like he's going to Botafogo, James, which I wanted to mention actually when I was covering Fogo, but I'll mention it now, seeing as a Red Bull link. He's playing in America. He did get transferred to Real Salt Lake. Now looks like he's on the verge. He's in Brazil, but he's signing for Fogo. Now, if this man was on the market, I thought maybe Bragantino might take a punt on him. It looks like they haven't done, and he's heading to Fogo. It's a man that I have covered as well with my team's links to Red Bull, obviously Leeds, partly owned by Red Bull. I did do a video in the summertime, James. I think Elias Manoel did feature in this video of 5 players in the RB system that I think Leeds should go for. Young striker, only 23-year-old, has done okay in USA. Did get transferred, like I said, to Real Salt Lake, but he has refused to play for Real Salt Lake, and he wants to push forward for this move to Fogo. So it's one to keep an eye on. I think he'll do quite well in the season if he should get that move to Fogo sorted. But I am surprised that Bragantino didn't go for him if he is on the market. As in terms of prediction, they'll do a lot better than last season. I don't think they'll be anywhere near the relegation fodder they were last season under Caxera. I think they'll be. I'm going to go with 8th position. I think there'll be a big improvement.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that for sure. Caixinha's back, of course, isn't he, with Santos? It'll be interesting when they take on each other. Of course, a local rivalry, really, as well, in the Sao Paulo kind of area. Well, that's it, George. That's the 4 clubs, the first 4 out the way. I hope that's been useful for the listeners just to kind of get an overview of where those clubs are at heading into the season and what we're expecting from them this time around. I think just before we end, George, I did want to point out another transfer actually that looks like it's going to go through, which I know this is going to annoy you if you haven't seen it already as well. It is unfortunately another Brazil to Russia export, and it's a player who you had an eye on as well for Leeds, potentially had a really good season at Cruzeiro, George. Mateus Pereira looks like he's in Russia. He's in St. Petersburg. He's having a medical with Zenit. So just your thoughts on that as well. Another top talent out of the league. I mean, this is what happens, isn't it? We're obviously new to the league, but it gets plundered all the time. Players come and go. I think a lot of players like Pereira use it as a bit of a way to get back into rhythm, into form, and then perhaps look for another move. Obviously, he's been in Europe in the past. Had a good season, didn't he? And Cruzeiro under Hardim could have been a real game changer for them, but another one who's on his way.
Yeah, disappointed with that, James. That was the first I've heard of it, actually. And Mateus Pereira, yeah, I did. I did have his eye. I thought maybe he's got championship experience with West Brom. I thought potentially Leeds in January could have gone. We need a number 10. It's well documented among the fan base. We know we need that. For me, Pereira would have been one to, say maybe, but obviously, who knows what's going on in everybody's minds. And obviously, he's wanted it's a big payday for them as well, isn't it? Going to Russia, you've got to be honest. I think there's, a bit of money there, isn't there, to play with. Obviously, it looks like Zenit are building quite a decent looking side then for the season. I don't know if the season started or whatever in Russia. Again, it's a league that I have no real knowledge of past the big name players that we hear about going there. And, we'll wait and see how he gets on. Obviously, like I said, it's disappointing from our point of view because you want to see players such as his quality. I know we mentioned him quite often, didn't we, James, last year? So, last season. So it's disappointing from that point of view. But, you've got to say from his point of view, fair enough. Again, I don't know how much in the window the Russian football is, but Zenit, like you said, it is a big team. It does have a tradition of having, big name Brazilian players go there and do all right. So let's, maybe one to keep an eye on possibly if we're going to have a look at, keep an eye on that kind of division. But yeah, disappointed from our point of view because he's a really he's a good technically gifted footballer really on his day. He did well in the Premier League, really. Definitely in the Championship for West Brom. And, disappointed on that news, really.
Yeah, I think it's saying here the window closes on Thursday. It closes today, so it's deadline day. So he is there apparently undergoing a medical. So if it doesn't happen today, it's not going to happen. But it does look like it is going to happen. The Brazilian window closes at the end of February, I believe. So not long for those clubs to do business as well. Not long for them to kind of replace him as well. But yeah, apparently he wants to return to Europe for family reasons. So there you go.
I mean, that's you want to return to Europe, but you know what I mean. You surely could have gone somewhere else. You know what I mean? It just that's crazy to me. To just
yeah. It is. I mean, to be fair, the window's closed in Europe, isn't it? So the rest of it,
I mean, potentially
it's either he sticks it out for a few months, which obviously you'd imagine he could have done, but didn't want to do that, and that's it.
I mean, who knows, James? Like you said, maybe there was talks with English clubs, maybe, or other teams in sort of more Central Europe potentially that maybe didn't happen in January. So maybe he was maybe he'll wait it out in Russia for a few months, and then maybe in the summertime he might want to make a move back to, like I said, maybe English football or, because he was a good player.
Yeah, it's also saying, I'm just reading up here on Globo, that it's saying that Zenit did actually try and sign Gerson from Flamengo, and they also tried to sign Rodrigo Galo, who had a brilliant season at Corinthians, but neither deal worked out, so they've gone for Pereira. I mean, thankfully, George, there have been quite a few leave. There was another one we mentioned last week. I can't remember who it was. Went to CSKA as well, but they, the window is closing, so that no more are going to leave. Whoever's going to leave is going to leave by today, Thursday, or not at all. So, disappointing, but that's the way it goes, isn't it? Sometimes. Anyway, that'll do, I think, for today. Unless there's anything you wanted to finish up on.
No, I don't think so, James. I think that's a good full sort of rundown of each of those four teams. Obviously, next week we're looking at, we're going further into the alphabetical order of the teams and how they fall. Do you want to remind the listeners who we will be looking at next week? I think the band are back in action. It looks like they're on strike this week, James. I know, but they've done they've done one in good time for us for next week. So we'll cash in on that one. But do you want to give the listeners the rundown of the four teams we'll be looking at?
Yeah, so we'll look at Ceará, who obviously we've covered a little bit already. We'll look at Corinthians, who ended the season brilliantly. We're going to look at Cruzeiro, who, as we mentioned, are set to lose Pereira. And then we're going to look at Flamengo. So, three really quite big teams, George, and then Seattle as well tacked on. So I don't know if you want to do again, or maybe I'll do Seattle, seeing as you went for Botafogo this week that we'd already covered. So I'll do Seattle and Cruzeiro. Maybe you go for Corinthians and Flamengo.
Yep, that sounds fine to me. Fine to me, James. Yeah, and we'll see how they're getting a fare next week. I think by that time it'll nearly be done. You said the Brazilian transfer market will close at the end of February, so
I think so.
You know, they've nearly done that. So by next week it'll be maybe near to deadline day, won't it? Then you know, and things will start to get exciting. So. Yeah, we'll see what happens, but last chance for teams to shore up their squads as well. So yeah, looking forward to having a look at those 4 teams and seeing how they're shaping up as well.
Yeah, for sure. So in the meantime, get getting up on those 2 teams. Thank you everybody for listening. It's been a good show. See you next week. We'll be back on Thursday, I think, again. I do.
Yeah, I do. Sounds like in a fishbowl there, James, but I do.
We're breaking it down, bringing the passion from every town. Let the world be filled with love tonight. Sway to the beat, make you feel so right. Summer, summer vibes, we're dancing in the heat. Go, go, go. Can't be beat up in Brazil, go spreading love in every way. In the sound of paradise.